In this lesson, we're going to see an actual delegation happening in a real iOS application. What we are going to do is this. We're going to have an iOS app with two view controllers. From one view controller, we navigate to the next one. In the next one, we will have a text field. We enter a value and we hit the back button. But when we come back to the very first view controller, we will see the message we entered in the second view controller. It's essentially going to be a way for us to send a message from second view controller to the first view controller when the back button is being pressed. So let's see how we're going to do that. I'm going to go to Xcode. I'm going to start a new project. This new project is going to be iOS single view application, Swift, and I'm going to call it Delegation iOS. And in my Delegation iOS, I'm going to do some stuff that we already know how to do them, like, adding a new view controller and everything. So let's say view controller is our very first view controller, and I'm going to have myself a second view controller. I'm going to call this one, let's call it green view controller, because I'm going to make its background green, obviously. So in the storyboard, I have the default one, which is essentially the view controller outlet, and I'm going to have another one. And this is a good time for us to, repeat some of the older topics, things that we covered in the previous sections. This is the one that's going to be green, so I'm going to make its background to become some sort of a green, and it's in the identity inspector. I'm going to call it to be the green view controller. So far we have two view controllers. I'm of course going to have a segue between this one to that one of the type show, and I'm going to call this one green segue ID. Green segue ID. Okay, so we got all of these taken care of. So the next thing is I need a button to navigate to the green view controller. So I'm going to add a button, and this button, since it's going to take us to the green one, is going to be green, and it says in maybe black, says go to green, and I'm not going to make a segue for it in here. We're going to make it programmatically. And I'm also going to have a label in here, which is essentially the message that we will receive. All right, so this one, I'm going to say, actually, its background, I'm going to leave it as dark gray, but its text, I'm going to make it green, because this is the message we received from the other side. And currently it says, message, is there something going to show up? Perfect, so we got that. Now, in the other view controller, I'm going to have a button, and that button is up here, and that button says, with a white background that is, indicative of the view that is going to go back to, it says go back, and that's about that. It says go back in black, and then I have a text field that I can enter a value in it. So that's a text field, and my text field is a little bit larger, and I like it without borders, and I like it to be a little bit larger, and I can say its background is very, very light gray, and the text in it says message. Perfect. So I've got everything that I need in terms of the outlets. Now I have to connect them to their respective things in the coding area, to the outlets as well as to the actions. So in here, I'm going to load my assistant editor, and I'm going to say for the first view controller, I'm going to need these outlets. I need an action that says action, go to green action. And I also need a label that says received message label. And that's about that. I've got a label and I got an action. Then I'm going to go to the other one, to the green one. And in the green one, apparently I have to do some cleanup. And I'm going to do all of that right now. And in the green one, I'm going to have a go back action. So that's going to be a go back action, as always. And I also have a text field that says message text field. So I've got a text field, I've got the action, everything is ready. So now let's go ahead and see how we want to do, how I want to pass messages around. The first thing I want to do is this. Every time that I press the button in the go to green action, I want to say this. I want to say self.perform segue with identifier, and here is the identifier that I need. I think I called it green Segway identifier. Yes, green Segway ID. So that's the name for it, green Segway ID, and the sender is nil. Now here's one thing with it, that when we go to a green action, we perform the segue. If you recall, we also have to prepare for that segue. And here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to say prepare for segue. And in an ideal world, if you want to be super careful about everything, you have to say if segue.identifier is blah, blah, blah. I'm not really going to do that simply because I know I only have one segue. So the only thing I am going to do is that I'm going to say var, and I'm going to call it green instance is going to be segue.destination. Now keep in mind the destination is a UI view controller, but I want it to be as green view controller. I want it to be of this type. I want it to be forced as, inferred as a green view controller. So far we prepared, even though we are not doing anything in here just yet, and we performed the segue. Let's see what we need in the green view controller. In here, we have a text field in here that we haven't really done anything, and we have a function that takes us back. Let's first deal with the function that takes us back. It says self.dismiss true, and that's about that. And don't do anything at completion. So that's one part of it. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say let text to send is going to be message text field dot text. So let's get the text in the message text field, and we have to do something with it. We have to do something. I just don't know what that thing is. So if it all goes well, by now we should be able to navigate back and forth. So let's go ahead and run this application. Even though some variables are not being used just yet, they're just sitting around there and we're not doing anything with them. But this application essentially does work, and it takes us from one view controller to the other one where there is a text field where we can enter values and where we can hit the back button. But obviously nothing gets communicated between our two view controllers. So once I have my app and I'm going to call this file to be a protocol create. And now I have this protocol that I'm going to say it is actually a protocol, and it's called sending message delegate. And that's about that. And it has one method called function send, which essentially gets a message of the type a string. And that's about that. That's all it does. So here in my view controller, the very first view controller, I'm going to say this class view controller conforms to UI view controller and also sending message delegate. So it conforms to both of them. And now we get an error saying, well, if you want it to conform to this, you also have to give it that method. That method is called, I forgot what it is called, so I'm just going to add it in here. It says send message. So it has to conform to this one. So what do you want to do whenever this function happens? We will come to this in a second. The other thing I want to do is this. I want to go to my green view controller, just like the last time. This is the guy who is going to be our sender. If you remember from our previous example, this was, for instance, our user. So in here, I'm going to say, well, I have a variable. I'm going to call it delegate, which is of the type sending message delegate. So I have this variable in green view controllers. So what do you want them to do? This is what I want them to do. When I press the go back action, I want my delegate to call its message, and I want to send this particular message, text to send. So that's the text that I want to send through the delegate method. Now, who is going to receive this on the other end? The view controller. This function has to receive it. What should it do once it received it? It has to put it in the received message label .text, has to become message. Now, there is one piece still missing, and that is this function works well. If we give him a message, it puts it in our label. This one works well. It sends it to its delegate. The only thing we don't know is the green view controller is delegating his tasks to which object. And that's something I haven't done yet. So I'm going to go to my green view controller, And in here, I'm going to say green instance dot delegate is going to be self. What it means is this. It means the green instance is going to delegate its tasks, all of its tasks, to self, which is the view controller, which does conform to send message delegate, which means if any green instance delegates its particular function called send, this class will respond. So when the green view controller says, in case you were going back, delegate.send this message, the one who is going to actually receive this message is going to be our view controller. This error is because, or warning is because we didn't change anything. So I'm going to turn that into a constant. And let's run our application one more time and see what do we get. And here is my simulator, and I have go to green and saying hello white, go back, and it says hello white. I go in here and I say beautiful sky. I don't know why I came up with that. I go back and it says beautiful sky. It sends a message to the other side. Let me quickly recap things that they matter. A big chunk of it doesn't really matter. So our view controller has a label, has an action, none of them matters, performs a segue. We know how that works. This part is a new thing, prepare for segue. It says get the segue destination as green view controller and set its delegate to be here. Now green view controller has a delegate variable in it, which is of the type sending message delegate, and since sending message delegate also has that particular function, whenever we call that one delegate.send, somebody would be on the other side trying to receive this. In this case, that it has to be the view controller, this guy, which does conform to sending message delegate, and it receives that one. So that's about that. We managed to successfully communicate between two objects of different classes, one of them conforming, the other one using it as a delegate variable. And let's move on doing the same thing once again as an exercise, and I will also do it at the end in Objective-C.